It's time to talk about Tesla as an investment. We've been underperforming the market now for almost 3 months. It's painful because not just that we're losing money in an up market, but also that we actually have a good understanding of the market. It's not like we're missing out. For example, we're technology investors. We're fundamental technology investors. We invest in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices, and we are actually witnessing a wave of fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. It's all summarized in Gen AI, but we are in it. We understand what's going on. We would have invested in other stocks had we had the capital, but we didn't have the capital. So in that sense, it's really not just a double-edged sword, but a multiple-edged sword in terms of underperformance, missing out opportunity costs, all these things. So in that sense, of course, it's high time for us to discuss why we're invested in Tesla. What is the fundamental reason why we're invested in the stock? The purpose of Orange Capital Partners is to give, the purpose of the fund is to generate wealth by investing in fundamentally new concepts and engineering practices. The purpose of this podcast series is to give people a sense what it feels like to run a hedge fund. So I think all these topics come well together here in this episode. For new listeners, we really try to give people a sense what it feels like to run a hedge fund. This is not investment advice. Please do your own work. Don't solicit us. We are not soliciting any investors with this podcast. This is us sharing our experiences. If people care, great. If not, then it's for our own sake. So we have a large position in Tesla. We also have a position in NVIDIA, which is fine. NVIDIA did really well this year. We're happy with that. But Tesla hasn't. And in times like this, you really have to sit down and think about really hard, why are you invested? Now, I want to say there's really three things that we care about with Tesla. One is scaling the manufacturing of electric cars. Second, it's software. And third, it's decarbonizing energy. So those are the three big themes that encompass Tesla. Now, each of them, of course, has a lot of sub-themes and sub-vectors, if you will, but I'm going to try to keep it very big picture here for people who are not fully invested in the nitty-gritty of Tesla, so they can still take something away from this. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's March 15, 2024. This is Krim Delko. For the day, the fund is up 40 basis points. The market's down 0.5%. For the year, we are down 22.2%. The market is up 7.7%. We're underperforming by 29.9%. So I think this already encompasses everything we need to know. This massive underperformance is driven by Tesla, and that's why we're doing this podcast now. We're trying to, not trying, but we're giving an overview over the three fundamental drivers that we believe will drive Tesla to become the most valuable company in the world and also give us an adequate return for the risk. So let's start with the manufacturing of electric vehicles. Now, this has a couple of sub-topics to be covered. I think fundamentally, let's talk about the production, the supply side of things. So if you want to replace the IC market with electric vehicles, you have to build a supply chain that can support millions and millions of cars. And Tesla is in the midst of this. They're doing it. It's fundamentally an engineering company. I think Elon Musk has proven this many times in Tesla and in SpaceX, that he has the ability to hire people that collectively can solve very difficult problems. We're not talking about Intel 1950s type problems when you go from transistor to compute and memory, of the hardest problems, but very close to the hardest problems. For example, scaling up battery production to terawatt hour scale, having a car that is capable of driving hundreds of thousands of miles, driven by electricity, having a fully functioning supercharging network, having a software that works when it needs to work under harsh conditions, whether it's heat or cold. Lots of these types of things have been solved. I think Tesla has shown many times, over and over again, that they can scale production. So this is less of a concern. It's still a concern. We have 4680, which needs to scale. You see, when we talk about scaling, we are really thinking about Wright's law. Okay, so what we need is we need scaling and at the same time a reduction of cost and a reduction of capital intensity, because that's related to scaling. Scaling is directly related to the economic viability of a product. So for example, a lot of people are talking about competition coming from OEMs, coming from Rivian, coming from Chinese competition. For us at Orange Capital Partners, the only thing that matters is really how much can they scale. And for example, a company like Rivian, they might have great products, they might have good customer acceptance of their products, but they don't have a scalable product yet. They might get there, but right now, the way this company is set up with the margin structure, the cash flow structure, the R&D is expensive. This is a podcast on its own, so talking about the Rivian, but it's a good example. You can't have a scalable business when you lose money per product that you sell. The same applies, by the way, to Uber. The same applies to Beyond Meat, Roku. Well, maybe Roku is a little different, but you can't have a business where the unit cost is such that it costs you less to provide a product than the money you make by selling it. And that doesn't mean overhead or investment cost or things along those lines. It just means per actual usage of the product. So just to illustrate that, there's businesses that make money from the get-go. Those types of businesses exist. So you start something and you sell whatever you sell at a higher price than it costs you to make it. Great for you. Keep going. Then there's businesses, and I would count Amazon and Tesla in those categories, which is that they need some time. They need some time to build an infrastructure. And what I call those businesses is Golden Gate Bridge type businesses. So it just takes some time to build the infrastructure. But once you have the infrastructure, you're ready to go. And what's really beautiful about the Golden Gate Bridge type businesses, once you have the infrastructure, each individual service, so in the case of the Golden Gate Bridge, each car driving across the bridge costs very, very little, and the margin is ginormous. So all you have to do is make sure that you can amortize the capital costs, the maintenance costs, things like that. So of course, Amazon and Tesla are not Golden Gate Bridges in the sense that they are also growing, evolving, changing. But in a sense, what they've done in the first 10 to 15 years of their lives is build a massive infrastructure to enable massive scale growth. And with that growth, the unit cost came down, and that flywheel is still going on. So in that sense, those are very viable businesses. And we believe that Tesla is on the right track to continue like that. Because with Tesla, unlike with Amazon, this has to continue. Now, Amazon's trying to be fair. They're doing things like 1 hour delivery and things like that. So they're trying to lower the cost for even more difficult services and products to be delivered. But fundamentally, again, I've used the word fundamental probably 10 times already, because this is a fundamental podcast, right? This episode is fundamental. What we're trying to say here is that, look, we've scaled Model Y, Model 3 to the level where the car's profitable even at a very low price, which is great. Now we need to get to the next level. We need single casting, we need 4680, we need other innovations in manufacturing, including the humanoid robot, of course, to lower the cost of production so the car can be even at lower cost, or maybe same cost but higher value. But here's the thing that we believe is the most interesting thing about Tesla, and this brings us to the second part of the thesis, which is software. And the software side of things is a little bit more complicated than most people think. Now, full self-drive is a big part of it, but it's not the only part. There is the operating system in the car, which, according to people like former CEO of Volkswagen and others, is one of the crucial competitive advantages of Tesla, which is the ability to have all the software connected in sort of an operating system type way. So that way you can do over-the-air updates. You can, you can have a software-defined car. This is my point here: is what Tesla is building is a software-defined car now. Now that is slightly different than just a full self-drive. Software-defined car means that you can change your sensors with software. You can change your suspension with software. You can do all kinds of things because it's a software-defined car. So very analogous to software-defined networking, software-defined optical networking in data center, for example. something that Google's doing. So anything that's software defined allows configuration, reconfiguration, adaptation, and adaptation, iteration. I guess hopefully you see where this is going. Listeners of this podcast series have heard us talk about this many times before. The fundamental idea of disruption, or coming up with new things, coming up with lower cost, better value type of products and services requires lots of iteration. So a software-defined car allows that, and I think Tesla's on the path. We're still relatively, we're not there. I mean, when you buy a Tesla, you're buying a car. You're not buying a software-defined car. But we're on that path, and clearly Tesla is by far the best in that sense. We could see Apple, although they gave up on their electric car, but that doesn't mean they're never going to do it. So companies like Apple or others could potentially become very good at software-defined cars. The Chinese, the Koreans, we'll see. Certainly not the OEMs. I don't think that they have the kind of DNA that requires that. Now let's talk about full self-drive as a separate part of the software stack. Of course, full self-drive is a big deal. And the reason full self-drive is a big deal is simply because cost per mile. Think of cost per mile. Like just today on X, Faraz sent out a dictionary, one of those, polls, and he asked, how much would you pay for a thing to drive you around? Now, that's a legitimate question, but it's the wrong question, because, you see, having full self-drive changes lots of variables. It's not like everything else is the same, and I'm just going to have a car driving me around. And whatever may happen, whether we have a full-fledged robotaxi fleet or something similar to that, that's not clear. But I think it's almost certain that with full self-drive, the miles driven of a car will go up quite a lot. And that's just typical with technology. You know, when we had breakthroughs in memory and compute, what happened is we just had a lot more usage. When we had breakthroughs in optical networking, we had a lot more traffic. Like whenever compute and Moore's law kick in and things like that, we just start consuming a lot more. And I think the same is going to happen to the car. We're just going to drive a lot more, drive a lot more. Now, that might not be great for the planet. I'm going to talk about decarbonizing and all that in the third part of this episode. But let's just stick with software for a second. What we predict is, what we predict is the following: if the software-defined car actually happens, and whether Tesla or not, but somebody actually brings this to market at scale, we will have a lot more miles driven per car, and that will bring down the cost per mile. And that's the key metric, cost per mile. People might not think like that in terms of, well, I'm buying a car, my cost per mile went from 90 cents to 85 cents, right? That's not how people think. People just look at the ads. The next Ford generation XYZ starting at 55,000 MSRP, blah, blah, blah. Nobody thinks like that. In the end, the way we really think as consumers is cost per mile. And the reason we think like that is because, just think about it. Like, are you going to pay a lot of money for a car that you're not going to drive a lot? Other than Ferraris and things like that? No. I mean, utilitarian people, which is most consumers, they will think, okay, I need this thing to drive around. How much is it going to cost me? Gasoline is part of the equation, insurance, and of course the miles driven themselves. And if you have FSD, you can drive a lot more. It requires also a better car, higher sturdiness and all that, which Tesla already has. Part of the problem with Tesla, I would think, is that the renewals in Tesla are actually not as good as people thought, because look at us. We have 130,000 miles in our car. It's a great car, still driving phenomenal, no maintenance costs, no nothing. So I think people will drive more with their cars, which will bring down the cost per mile, and that will eventually kick in. So we do predict crowding out of the ICE car and a takeover of the electric car based on cost per mile, not based on subsidies, not based on any of those things, simply cost per mile. So this is the biggest reason why we are invested in Tesla, because you could have a scenario where cost per mile, which right now, let's say, is about $1 per mile in the US, and it comes down to 30 cents per mile, which is a 3x lowering, which could happen through slightly lower cost per car, but much more miles driven, and therefore a lot more utility, a lot more value, and you could still have very decent margins. We predict mid-teen to high teens operating margins for Tesla. So let's say 17-18% operating margin, and that includes, of course, the hardware and the software. And then we have Apple type margins. We have at least for the first, maybe for the next 10 years, we have mid-20 sales growth, Apple type margins. So we have 30 to 40% earnings growth CAGR, because you have the margin improvement from current levels. So we could see something in the $20 to $30 range times, let's say 30 to 40, so $1,000 in the next 5 years, which is about 5 to 6x in the stock. And this is the main reason why we're still invested in the stock. But let's not talk about this yet. Let's finish the sort of fundamental conversation. And the third reason why we invest in Tesla is the decarbonizing energy. So this is important. This is not just some political gibberish or anything like that. This is social, right? People care about the environment. Whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't matter. People do care. We compare that to smoking, right? Smoking was accepted for at least, I believe, 5-6 generations, maybe 4 or 5 generations, right? Our parents still smoked. My parents smoked. I mean, they're very healthy people, but it just was normal to smoke. And I believe, strongly believe that the next generations will be much more careful about the environment, in particular about decarbonizing the energy infrastructure. So what Musk started, and what Tesla is now doing, and many people at Tesla, still on Musk, of course, are doing, which is working on better battery technology, better solar technology, better charging technology, better everything, that is going to continue. So we have just a lot more investments in decarbonizing energy. Tesla is doing mainly what they're contributing here is on the battery side of things, and that's their main business. We have the energy business, of course, which let's not forget the energy business, but in terms of profitability, maybe a little bit more sketchy right now. But in general, we believe that a company like Tesla, which is building an innovation stack around decarbonizing the energy infrastructure, which includes transportation, but is not only based on transportation, will have a massive advantage towards many other many other companies, and therefore have the ability to become a very valuable company. So these are the 3 main reasons why we're invested. Now, there's certainly some issues with, let's say, recycling of lithium-ion batteries. We have Red Bull Materials trying to solve that problem. We have issues of sourcing magnets, sourcing rare earth metals, things along those lines, but those will be solved. Commodities are commodities for a good reason. They are things that we decide that they're valuable, and then we invest to get them. And if we can't get them in Congo, then we'll get them in Nevada. We will be able to get those things. So that's not a concern. What we need is knowledge. We need investment. We need creativity. All those things that have been driving humanity ever since humanity decided to go out from the Stone Age. And this will continue. So as investors, that's why we're invested in Tesla. Now, short term, that all might sound very sort of long-term type stuff, and I have leverage, I can't afford to wait. I can hear people say things like that. Actually, one of the YouTubers even said that recently, and kudos to him, he was right about that. He said, look, I'm sorry if the stock is not going to work for you in the short term, or if you need the stock to work in the short term, in the long term it will work. And what they mean by long term is really those 3 factors that we just elaborated. So to summarize, what we really care about with Tesla is scaling up manufacturing, software-defined car, decarbonizing energy. Those are the 3 big themes that allow us to indulge in very high valuations for the stock. Not high in terms of PE, but high just in terms of market cap. Trillions of dollars, because they are replacing very important infrastructure with better infrastructure. And whether that will happen or not is not even the question. The question is when, not if. The only way this will not happen is if there's a very coerced political movement stopping that. It's not impossible. We probably had this happen in the past. I can't think of something specifically happen like stopping something that is good. People might think, well, look at nuclear power. They stopped that. Yeah, but nuclear power is bad because nuclear power doesn't allow for errors. It's not an intuitive, disruptive technology. And most importantly, also, it was stopped by the people. So if people don't want to smoke. The smoking, even our lawmakers, they allow smoking. The lobbying was too strong. What did not happen was the people didn't want. So I would say fossil fuels will have the same fate like nuclear power, which is people will stop it. And you have a lot of opposition to Tesla right now, political opposition and things like that. But in the end, the cost per mile and the decarbonization will win. This is our thesis. And this is very important, especially for those who are concerned about the political influence of Musk. What Musk's doing politically, that's a whole different podcast. I don't even want to go there. But fundamentally, most importantly, is the fact that you lower cost per mile and you make it cleaner and you make it less intense in terms of carbon footprint and you lower the cost, you will win. So to summarize, the reason we're investing in Tesla is for three reasons. One is the ability to drive an innovation stack along the manufacturing vector. Wright's law comes to mind here. So higher scale, lower cost, better quality, higher iteration. Second is software-defined car, which includes FSD, but it's not only FSD. It just means that there's more adaptability, again, lower cost, higher value. And third is decarbonization of the energy infrastructure, which is a socially driven necessity. The companies that can build innovation stack around that will capture massive amounts of value for society and also for their investors. And Tesla is one of them. Thank you.